All right, let's bring in Jenny Horne, markets correspondent, co-host of Next Gen, to take a deeper dive into some of the news around Tesla. So catch people up on what's the latest here, Jenny.
I know, Diana, it's another morning, another Tesla headline to get through. And I know that with the recent volatility we've seen to the downside, there is an extra attention on what's already definitely perceived as one of the most heavily traded and most important names to the overall market. So as far as Tesla's, recent news today, we are seeing they're vowing to now double their U.S. vehicle production. As the story has been, we've seen some severed relationships overseas, due in part to the fact that there are some other macroeconomics weighing on vehicle production overseas, but also the fact that Elon Musk has become a very polarizing figure. But now saying that the company plans to double its U.S. vehicle production within just the next 2 years, which is aligning with President Donald Trump's policies and I think showing confidence, hopefully, in the nation's future. So he did say on X, in support of the policies of President Donald Trump and to demonstrate our confidence of the future, Tesla commits to doubling its vehicle production in the U.S. within 2 years. But of course, this comes, again, amid challenges for Tesla. They did say that they have seen, significant global sales falling. We've seen the shares lose about 43% of their value so far this year and experience a pretty sharp decline with a 15% drop on Monday, although they were not the only one. Actually, the biggest company by market cap that slid was Apple, which shaved off about $170 billion in market value in just one day. But the downturn can be attributed to a variety of factors when it comes to Tesla. As we know, they were caught up in the massive euphoria surrounding President Donald Trump being elected. Now we've also seen sales fall in various regions. I think China is the most important narrative there. Electric vehicles fell 49% year over year in February and actually did lag its major Chinese rivals by a significant margin. So this is good news, yes, but I would also say that you can post on X and make these promises for whatever kind of target you want. Are you actually able to deliver is the main question. We've been promised FSD since 2019. Part of it's infrastructure, part of it's not on Elon Musk, but I don't necessarily entirely trust the timelines in which he gives because he's a consistent pattern of oftentimes pushing those back, Diane.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say one of his patterns is not that he wouldn't necessarily deliver, but it's often the timing of reaching these goals. So, making a pledge, whether it's a verbal or post on Twitter X, that is something that he's done before, touted different targets, but the actual achievement of it often ends up being later. But look, the stock is having a meaningful response today. I do wonder if some of that also has to do with, how beaten up it's been in general. So maybe some investors buying the dip here. Any other pieces of this that you want to add or something we need to keep in mind as it comes to Tesla?
I will say that those enthusiasts from the sell side, like yesterday we talked to a note out of Dan Ives who did say, okay, Elon Musk has to become this leader that we're so desperately longing for right now for Tesla. Like, get away from the Doge stuff, get away from some of the, unfortunately, I think also turbulence related to X, which did suffer a massive cybersecurity attack this week. But he was the most, I would say, is seemingly frustrated with Musk that I've heard from Dan Ives for in quite some time, who does still have the street high price target on Tesla shares. Also, there are now a lot of these enthusiasts, those with a more buy or obviously optimistic leaning rating, that are saying, hey, we definitely see why there's some of this pressure, but perhaps it's overdone. But valuation has always been the argument of things need to come down. Its valuation has gotten really high. Tesla's always traded with a high valuation. So I think that what Tesla needs to do is have Elon Musk talk more about Tesla, less about Donald Trump.
All right, Jenny Horne, thanks a ton for the latest on Tesla. Shares higher in the pre-market after getting beat up pretty bad earlier this week and throughout the year, honestly. All right, let's bring in Kevin Green, senior markets correspondent, to help set up some of the other action today. All right, I know CPI is a big focus today, but obviously we can't forget about tariffs. We have the latest happening there, the sweeping tariffs from the White House, although not as draconian when it comes to the threat of increasing tariffs on Canada. So, KG, why don't you catch people up on where we stand with the tariffs situation?
Fluid here, Diane. Actually, early on yesterday, the expectation was the steel and aluminum tariffs would actually be increased to 50%, up from 25%. But later in the day, it seems like they actually did back that down. Now, they did actually implement some tariffs today, that start actually today here. But you're starting to see maybe a little bit of a shift or maybe some cooperation when it comes to Canada. That's something to keep in mind here. But the EU actually did impose retaliatory tariffs on around $28.3 billion worth of goods here. Now, this is actually kind of interesting here. So around 8 billion euro is previously actually suspended tariffs that they're now reinstating. And then they have around 18 billion euro in new tariffs that will be actually imposed here. And they did say that they're going to have strong and proportionate tariffs if this battle continues here. And so once again, it's kind of a tit for tat back and forth here. The EU side of the equation really has not been really priced in to the market as a negative item, as we are seeing the market's actually a little bit higher here today. But hopefully we continue to get this trickling in of maybe some cooperation or maybe a little bit of a ceiling when it comes to these back and forth increases when it comes to tariffs as a whole. Now, what will be kind of interesting, kind of going back to the aluminum and steel tariffs, a lot of those metals we do actually import a significant amount of, also copper, and a lot of that is coming from Canada. So we'll have an impact when it comes to the industrial and manufacturing side of our economy, and that's probably already being reflected in manufacturing PMI sentiment from a lot of these purchasing managers, as well as the potential prices paid component that has been elevated for the most part. So some of this might be priced in, some of it once again maybe a little bit of a relief that we're seeing some cooperation here, and I think that's why the market, among other factors, is probably looking like it's trying to go higher here before the CPI print.
So with regard to the tariffs and the back and forth between the U.S. and Canada, did that seem to have to do with also, that Canada had threatened to kind of cut off electricity to certain states? There seemed to be this back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. And is it kind of seem like a temporary, not meeting in the middle, I don't know how to exactly call it, but is that what caused the backing down of the 50% tariffs?
Yeah, I would say Quebec definitely kind of, let's say they may have pulled their tactical nuke option, right? Basically raising prices on electricity, and then also threatening to actually cut off the electricity supply to some of these northern states. That's actually a very big deal. And then also putting on the table here an impact when it comes to energy, especially when it comes to crude oil flows. So those two things will have an immediate impact when it comes to the consumer, and that's where you probably saw a little bit more of a reaching out from the White House in order to try to dampen down or try to resolve some of these issues, because usually when those electricity prices kind of go up because of how the grid is really kind of constructed, there's not a lot that you can really do outside of paying massive surcharges for domestic production, and that's something that the White House probably did not want to see.
And then in terms of kind of the effect on markets, you said the EU tariffs haven't really been priced in. Is that because the expectation is there could be some backpedaling from here?
Well, let me clarify the statement. I think the market has priced the EU retaliatory tariffs in. I think what they actually did enact was a little bit lower than what the market probably had expected. So I think that's probably why you're seeing a little bit of a relief bounce, because once again, it was lower than what the market has expected here. I would say just from a broader equity market, obviously we've seen a lot of aggressive selling here. But what was actually very interesting yesterday, Diane, is some of these speculative stocks that we have seen rise over the last couple of months that have really aggressively sold off, like a Palantir or a Constellation Energy. Those stocks actually did pretty well yesterday in a market where we were still down on the broader market, looking at the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100. And that's something that you usually do not see for in this risk off, sell everything type of mentality here. So I would not be surprised if we do actually see a little bit of a relief rally, and especially if the CPI numbers either come in line with expectations or come in lower than expectations, that might give us enough of a boost to try to move us higher. That doesn't mean that this is the low, but a counter trend rally seems like it would be appropriate from a technical standpoint.
Okay, I do want to talk one individual stock that we're watching in the pre-market action. Intel gaining some ground. Seems like it's fueled by this Reuters report. What's the latest here?
Yeah, so there's obviously has been some rumors out there being floated about their foundry business and potentially, some buyers coming in and trying to pick up that business, which has not been very profitable, as well as behind a lot of deadlines that they have set over the years here. So it does appear that Taiwan Semiconductor actually did pitch a joint venture with some of the other U.S. chip designers like Nvidia, AMD, and Broadcom to take stakes in Intel's foundry operations. Now, TSMC would not actually own more than 50% of the shares. I think that would, or ownership, I think that also kind of gets over maybe some of the hurdle when it comes to the regulatory bodies that have to approve this particular deal. And it does appear that they actually did, bring in Qualcomm at some point. And we did have that rumor about a month ago that Qualcomm was looking at trying to take over their foundry business, but it appears that Qualcomm has actually backed down here. So overall, this is actually a really decent news when it comes to Intel. Unfortunately, they probably could have benefited a little bit more when it came to fiscal spending measures like the CHIPS Act. But if that does get kind of backed out, they're going to need some private capital in order to try to ramp up their foundry business in a manner that's going to meet up with demand in the market and the rapidly changing chip designs that we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years.
Okay, and really quickly, I want to get your S&P 500 levels today, especially since we broke through that 5,600 level that you mentioned to watch out for yesterday. What should we be watching for support and resistance today?
Yeah, looking to the upside, 57.20 to the upside, downside 54.20. There's a massive gap here. There's a high implied volatility when it comes to the VIX. Once again, everybody's looking at the CPI numbers that are going to be hitting the wire here in about 15 minutes or so. So I would continue to expect some volatility. But if you kind of look at the mega cap names right now in pre-market, they are catching a bid. Hopefully they can sustain that bid at market open, which has been something that they were not able to do over the last couple of sessions.
Yeah, all right, 57.20 to the upside, 54.20 to the downside. Thanks a ton, Kevin Green, Senior Markets Correspondent. Appreciate you, KG.